Speed dating panel session. Okay. You can hear me okay? Awesome. All right. So we are towards the very end of a very long process of listening to one another, trying to stay focused and listening, talking to one another, hoping that actually some of those messages stick and that we do something with them. And actually, at this stage of COP28, hanging in there to continue to believe one another that we are collectively going to be making a difference this time around. So this panel is completing a series of panels here in the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, looking at the role of culture, creative arts, creative industries, music, the world of human imagination and the translation of human imagination into human activity and productivity. How does all of that world come into play in the job of transformation of human lives and the transformation of the human design for life that we so desperately need to address climate crisis, to address biodiversity collapse, to address pollution, to address poverty and inequality? In other words, how do we harness our capacity to imagine something and to turn that imagination into something real and living and tangible and felt as a way of addressing the need to transform our whole world as quickly as possible? This session is focused on story, on the power of narrative, the role of story, the power of story, and the place of story in this world. And I am going to start by straight away both welcoming a very unusual, very diverse set of perspectives and actors into this conversation, and acknowledging straight up that we have never yet had a chance to talk to one another. So this is a creative session in live storytelling and live meaning making amongst each other. And we do have one change on the scheduled panel. We were to have amongst us Solitaire Townsend, who is CEO and founder of Futera and of Solutions Union, who has unfortunately had to go back unexpectedly. So she is not here, and we have the great privilege to be joined by Laura Rojas, who is the CEO and founder of Ninjas in Pajamas, who will join us as this session and carry forward from the previous session. So you see an amazing lineup of speakers. I'm going to just very, very bluntly introduce as names. So as you speak, please bring in your element of where you're speaking from. Sveta Chakraborty, who is the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. Matteo Benedetti, founder of Benedetti Life. Jarrell Clay from Hip Hop Caucus. That's you. And Melissa June Rowley, who is the founder and CEO of Warrior Love Production. Laura Rojas, Ninjas in Pajamas, and my name is Kirsten Dunlop. I'm the CEO of an organization called EIT Climate Kick, whose job is to try and bring innovation to transform places at scale, cities, regions, countries, innovation systems, not only innovation individual solutions. So I'm going to start with a premise setting, and we're going to start by reflecting individually upon this particular challenge, and then we'll drill into some of the elements that each of you bring to it. We have been operating for the last 50 years on one particular theory of a change when it comes to human mobilization, and that is the notion of increased awareness and understanding of threat and risk. In other words, we've invested in increasing or closing the gap on a deficit of knowledge and awareness with respect to climate change as an existential threat, the climate challenge as something that would need to mobilize human transformation and human action. We've tended to focus on a science-led, science-driven understanding of that in terms of carbon emissions, the story, the understanding of global greenhouse gases, how they heat up, why they get trapped in the atmosphere, how they have feedback loops, and what that means in terms of human livelihoods. We have fed our understanding or our hypothesis that if we help people understand how disastrous this situation is, they will make changes in their daily lives, make changes in their businesses, in their investments, and in their practices. And we have catastrophically failed. We are not making those changes. We are not finding the courage to do something dramatically different. This session is exploring the challenge and the opportunity to look at the other side of this question and address the deficit of imagination. Human societies have rarely transformed everything for the sake of leaving behind something. They have transformed everything for the sake of moving to something more aspirational, more powerful, more compelling than a status quo. And for that, we need to work out, how would we describe the future that we want? How do we describe a future that is sufficiently nuanced, diverse, localized, meaningful, place-based, context-based, that can bring all of our diversities on a journey of transformation? And how do we understand that while we have been focusing, we here needs to be carefully thought about as the we who are worrying about climate action, while we have been focusing so much on education and raising awareness, there is a parallel storytelling going on. A storytelling of no need to panic, a storytelling of slow transition, a storytelling of how terrible it would be to transform. So not only do we need to work out how to describe the future we want, we need to work out how to win the story war. And this is a war. So here we are to explore what that might look like. I would love us to reflect together on, how does story make the impossible possible? How do we get into hearts and minds to connect with people differently? What can be made to happen in the next 5, 10 years? How would we get from this COP to the next stop with something materially different in a mobilization of imagination? Can I start with you, Jaro? What is your take? Please explain a little bit. Where are you speaking from?
Thank you. So I'm Jarrell Clay. I'm joining you all as an Associate Senior Director for Digital and Production at Hip Hop Caucus. And at Hip Hop Caucus, we believe that production is the new protest in terms of how we tackle issues of racial justice, but also climate justice in our space. I came into the storytelling business, if you will, as a AAE at Edelman, which is a PR firm, the largest PR firm in the world. And while I was there, I was on the energy and transportation teams. And so if you think about it, I'm kind of doing a 180 in this moment, where I was writing op-eds for energy CEOs about rare earth minerals in 2012, right? And now joining on this side of the fight, if you will, because it is a war, to let folks know about the dangers that I've learned while I was in that space, but also how we can communicate with each other to help folks understand the issue from their lens. And so when we talk about how we get to 1.5 and below, what does access look like for clean air and clean water? What does a world where we reimagine Black, brown, and indigenous spaces where we thrive, how is that materializing in policy? And how can we use artists and influencers and other folks from the culture to bring those stories not only to the surface for folks, but also make sure that we actualize it in how we implement the solution for climate justice. One of the challenges that I see is that messenger matters, right? And as you said, for the last 50 years, we've been relying on data and science to be the messenger, whereas in this day and age, and I will also acknowledge from the Hip Hop Caucus that we're also celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip hop, right? What does the next 50 years look like when everyone has access to the mic? That's how we see it from the cultural perspective. But what does the next 50 years look like when we're actually serious about our existence? And one of the many ways we do that is through comedy, through music, through film, scripted and unscripted. But it brings the solution or alternatives to what we're currently dealing with to audiences who don't see themselves in the fight, don't see themselves responsible for what's happened over time. And we're able to bring back humanity to a system that often oppresses that very humanity?
That's a fantastic question. What does the next 50 years look like when everybody has access to the mic? Let's come back to that and play with that. Can I come to you, Laura, on how does the art of digital imagination engage in story and story formation?
I think I'm going to move a little that question around. Esports, my organization is an esports team, is based on fandom. The only reason why we have people that follow us on social media or anywhere or follow our teams is because fandom. They want to belong to a community. That feeling of belonging, and I said this in my previous panel, but that warm feeling that you get when you open your social media or you open Discord or you open any place of communication or as a touch point with our brand is that feeling of love, of community, of fandom. So building that from nothing. NIP is 22 years old, and NIP just started to gain like a big critical mass in the past, I would say 10 years. So when you see that feeling, that sense of community, that warm feeling, that's how you start building storytelling. How do you make your fan or that person who is on the other side, whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling a piece of clothing, whether you're selling a service, how do you get that person getting that warm feeling? If it's either content, the content being curated in a way where you open it up and we have this video, every time I watch it, I cry because it's that feeling of like excitement, of deep, deep love. So I think that that's one of the main things in our industry where we try to strive on, that love, that warm, fuzzy feeling, you know, that you get.
And is there something in that love and sense of community that can partner with a sense of bringing people into discourse and to belonging into agency who have been systematically excluded or placed on a side of responsibility where one side of the world literally passes to the other the consequences of action? How is that kind of action possible, that reshifting of a story of integration rather than of division?
Gaming happens behind a screen. Behind a screen, and I'm gonna use a very like terminology that there's no color, there's no race, there's no gender. You're behind a screen. You can be whoever you want to be. I can be right now sitting behind a screen and I can change my voice. If I want to be a robot, if I want to be a minion, whatever I want to be, I can be it. So behind a screen, you're nobody. You can be anyone who you want to be. So building communities that way, that creates anonymity, but at the same time creates that warm, fuzzy feeling and still makes you feel part of a bigger and greater community. I think that's a way. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I absolutely agree. And I think the more we're able to connect, say, the Gulf South to the global South from a U.S. domestic perspective, it helps folks understand that what they're dealing with in Sudan is no different than what's happening in Louisiana, right? The fights are the same. The pathway to justice looks a little bit different, but collectively, that solidarity is going to be so crucial. And I think what folks understand but may not keep top of mind is that music is our universal language. And so how do we come together to create those moments where we're uniting and just being together with that solution?
I come from Australia where music, the song lines, are the literal ways of writing into land relationship and belonging and humility of being held by land. Thank you very much. Let me come then back to this question around how does story make the impossible possible, give us the chance of imagining a future where we live well sustainably. Can I turn to you, Mattea?
How I start my journey was with the vision, and this vision was to create a fashion brand that represents the highest values possible in the fashion industry now. And these values were so high that my question was if this kind of fashion brand can survive on the market. Because I put the highest criteria inside in terms of sustainability, ethics, how it's produced, what kind of materials I use. And what I saw, is the problem that how to catch and motivate people to buy something that it's more expensive than fast fashion. And here comes the story. And one story was because normally when you explain to people about sustainability, it's they feel guiltness or they feel frustrated because they don't understand. Because in terms of textiles, there is a lot of chemics behind. There are formulas, there are compositions. It's all the way I can explain hours and hours how some garments is made in sustainable way. That's why I start using innovative textiles like made with apples, pineapples, like very simple words that people, I catch people through materials, interesting materials, but I don't complicate. And another thing I said, okay, but I need them to catch more emotionally, because when you are catch emotionally, you do something and you're even proud of yourself that you did something. That's why I decided that each collection I will dedicate to one animal species in extinction. What I did, I get a lot of interesting visuals and material to put on my garments, and that's why all patterns we did it in the house, and we explained the stories of the animals that are connected with humans, which because we are restrict their habits, their way of living, and through these stories, I explain a story of our planet and about humans. And this is how I motivate people to buy and to think what they buy more sustainable, and they are become an active actors in this transition to more sustainable planet.
So you're using the power of a brand to capture imagination, not only for a sense of what I want to associate with, but my own agency in doing so.
Yes, because I saw that explaining sustainability, we don't have time. And really, we don't have time. And that's why I want to create something so radical that I said, we can all produce in this way now. We don't need to wait 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. We can do it now. It's an example. It's very difficult to design like this because you're very limited. You have to know that when I started, I have 2 colors, 3 materials, and before I work as a costume designer for opera houses. So for me as a designer, it was quite a shock to start designing with so much limitations. But where I bring the brand, it's you don't understand if it's sustainable or not. It's just beautiful garments, well designed, and that's all.
Thank you. Well, since you're invoking we don't have time, let's come to somebody who runs an organization that's calling that out as a global challenge.
Whether that was intentional or not, I'll take it. Thanks for the show.
Go for your life. Sveta, over to you.
Thank you. So I run a company called We Don't Have Time. It's the world's largest broadcaster for climate content and solutions. You'll find us next to CNN and CNBC here, not too far from here, in fact, walking. And we're trying to capture stories. We're interviewing everyone here, from individual voices to not-for-profits, to company CEOs, to former presidents, sitting presidents, country delegation heads, the actual diplomats, negotiators, to capture the pulse of what's happening at COP28 and to share that to the globe and to those who can't be in this room. And there's so many that want to know what's going on and that want to be connected to these conversations, that want to engage in a two-way dialogue, but just can't necessarily be here. But that doesn't mean that they should be left out. And we have the technology, we have the broadcasting capabilities to bring them in. We have a platform that allows for that two-way engagement. So this is communication science. My background is as a behavioral scientist and a communication scientist. There's a science behind everything we're talking about here. We're talking about storytelling, but I can tell you that we've actually put these hypotheses forward and found them to be true, that if we share people's stories, we can reach them through emotion, through music, through fashion, through all these different experts that we have on stage contributing their particular component of what brings humans together and draws them in and gets them to, motivates them to actually act. It's not just about taking information and disseminating it. That hasn't worked. Scientists have been doing that for decades. It's about taking the information, presenting it through a trusted spokesperson, through a trusted mechanism to reach that audience and to align, predict their behavioral outcomes and align it to the realities of the science so that they have information that they're armed with to protect themselves, to protect their communities, to protect their regions, right? So we're capturing all of that here through different faces and voices because there's somebody that's trusted that is going to reach that person that's watching on the other end of that screen. And that's what we're trying to bring technology to do at mass scale. We want to reach millions and millions of people. And I'm sick of hearing people say that climate is a niche topic. Sure, it's not sports, it's not politics, it's not pop culture, but it can be if we're smart about how we bring climate into the fold and attach it to music and fashion and everything else. Now it's going to be the kind of thing that people get excited to talk about, the solutions, the bringing a brighter future, contributing to bringing in a brighter future that's just, that's equitable, that's exciting. That's something that people like talking about. And we're witnessing that, and we're seeing the audience increase. You know, we're seeing the actual numbers increase, but we're seeing the interest and the engagement increase, and we're measuring that through our platform. And it really comes down to creating a platform, a space, virtually, and then ultimately in the real world, where people feel they're connected and contributing. And that's the game changer. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sveta.
Kirsten, if I can just add one thing that I forgot to say. There's one thing that everyone wants, and it's to be cool. It's the cool factor, right? Who doesn't want to be cool here? We all want to be cool. And I think that's what plays the game also. And that's why all of us sitting here, I think we're pretty cool talking about the things that we're talking about. So the cool factor.
So I think there's an interesting spectrum here around being cool, feeling kind of reclaimed, reconnected, or being given a voice. And something that really is also that I want to come back to about being reassured, because this notion of trying to find the trusted spokesperson that you can align to your understanding of the world is also really critical. Melissa, let me come to you. What's your place in this whole discussion? What are you doing in the world?
Sure. So I'm approaching storytelling around climate action from a few different lenses. My company, Warrior Love Productions, does production. We do thought leadership, content strategy, marketing, community building, business development. Our biggest project right now is in partnership with the World Bank. We're developing something called the Low Carbon City Program, which is helping cities in the Global South tap into the voluntary carbon market. But before I started to do any of this, I was a journalist. I started my career as a producer at CNN and Associated Press and E! Entertainment 20 years ago. So I'll first talk about it from the World Bank kind of government lens. So do any of you work in carbon markets, or are you... Wow, this is the first non-carbon market panel I've been to. Well, if any of you are familiar with carbon markets, you'll probably notice the storytelling isn't great. It really needs a lot of work. It needs to be humanized. And when I think about that particular sector, that particular part of climate, and when I think about just the general headlines, most of the mainstream headlines we see about climate, we see 1.5, we see net zero, lowering emissions. That means nothing to the average person. There needs to be some kind of human aspect, and all of my fellow panelists have touched on that so far, the community aspect, the emotion, like changing the systems, getting the local communities, the local representatives of different regions that are most affected, getting them represented, and getting them on these panels. So from the concept of looking at how companies can approach it, it's looking at from a carbon markets perspective, and even though nobody works in carbon markets, the carbon credits are supposed to go back to the local communities. Yet I don't see any corporations talking about those communities or having any of those people represented, and that there needs to be some kind of humanization around that. From the journalist side of things, when I was a red carpet producer for CNN Entertainment, that was a very different life, but it was a very fun era. I was interviewing celebrities at movie premieres and the Oscars and film junkets, and people like to be cool. People want that cool factor. Most of these people that we'd see on TV, these celebrities, you can spot them or name them within 3 seconds. We need to be creating climate celebrities, climate heroes. There's a number already of them in the youth activism movement, which I'm sure some of you have met them. But in addition to that, I don't think we necessarily need to hit people over the head with climate action storytelling all the time. And this is what I mean by that. There's a company called Good Energy. Have any of you heard of Good Energy? Right. So they've been doing activations and workshops here. And what they do is they work with screenwriters and TV writers to help them integrate compelling, accurate stories into the actual storylines of their scripts. There's a really beautiful storyline that I love in the series Ted Lasso. Anybody a Ted Lasso fan? All right, a couple. All right, a couple. So in season 2 of Ted Lasso, there's a Nigerian footballer named Sam, and he decides to boycott the sponsor of the team, which ironically is called Dubai Air, which is owned by an oil company. And he decides to boycott it because his father informs him that this oil company is destroying the Nigerian environment. And he takes a stand, and his whole team stands behind him. And the entire episode is about the solidarity that he and his teammates have for one another. If we can integrate more stories like that into pop culture, we're going to go someplace really far and actually make a dent. Because climate affects, as all of you know, every aspect of our lifestyle. It affects our transportation, the air we breathe, our health, our mental health, the clothes we're wearing, you know, the news that we're seeing, the content we're consuming. And in addition to that, it affects every aspect of business, whether it's our supply chains, our corporate social responsibility, our marketing. So there's no reason that climate storytelling can't be integrated in small, more kind of subtle ways, as well as more obvious, blatant ways.
Thank you. So I want to pick up on this idea of embedding storytelling to the point where it's not a niche discourse, it's the discourse. One of the challenges there is that we are asking people to be constantly telling stories to each other about making the world. And that requires a comfort with the idea that you have a choice, that you have agency, that you have a role to play, that there is something that you can do to deal with the complexity of that. How does the world that you are involved in storytelling about making come together in some kind of organized way? Where have you seen remarkable or really powerful examples of that, the power of story to unlock people's sense of their ability to make a difference and to make a whole world different? Anyone's got a good example in mind?
Do you remember the ice bucket challenge? Does anybody remember the ice bucket challenge? So campaigns and stories that, as again, everybody's touched on in this panel so far, that make people feel joy and feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. How many people just wanted to have their name called out in an ice bucket video so they could do it, even though no one really wanted the experience of having an ice bucket dumped all over them? They wanted to be a part of this theme, this trend, this movement that was going on. So going back to the warm, fuzzy feeling that you were talking about, it's human emotion. We've got to make these stories emotional and joyful and hopeful. Climate mongering is getting us nowhere. These doom and gloom stories and the doom and gloom schooling. Most people that look at that just want to turn their eyes and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. When there actually is something they can do about it on a voting level, on a sustainable level, on a livelihood level, and the way that they're living their lives. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to create a magically viral video all of a sudden, but I mean, just getting really creative, thinking about what motivates people to feel like they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
I love the idea, sorry if I could jump in.
Go.
I love the idea of just individuals sharing their solutions at the local level. That goes a long way. We see it because we can measure it through our platform, because it inspires a solution that's happening in Indonesia that we're able to share to an audience can then trigger somebody who was sitting on some, that, you know, whether or not to act or not, even if it's the same solution, just that inspiration then just starts that ball rolling down the hill, right? That picks up momentum. So there's so much power in just being able to, and this is my contribution to this space, everybody has a role to play, but to be able to bring individual stories to the forefront, because we know that that's what, again, science of behavioral action, that's what motivates people to act. And that's what we need. We need a groundswell of collective global action. And then we need policies, and that's why we're here, right, at these multilateral negotiations because we need the policies to get behind the solutions to support these solutions, whether they're social solutions or technological solutions. We need the combination of a public that is starting them and pushing for them and policy that underwrites them all. So I'm big on these individual stories getting the airtime that they deserve. And again, it comes down to, is the person talking to you, do they look like you? And I'm all about anonymity, and the explanation that you gave, I think, makes a lot of sense. The science we know is that we're more likely to trust people that look like us, quite frankly. And so, and the influencers and the celebrities, if we heard from LeBron James, and we're trying to get him to say it, right, and Taylor Swift and Oprah, if we get some of these really popular, trusted spokespeople to come out and take the mic and be brave enough to actually just say this is what needs to be done to their audiences, that's a massive game changer. So we're really working to do that too. But in the meantime, we need people that look like the audiences that they're talking to reach those audiences, because there is that innate trust that exists there, and that moves people that are on the receiving end towards action.
And who, therefore, are we missing in this discussion? Who is not here, not engaged, not being pulled in to becoming the trusted storyteller to their peers or to other communities about why to change, how to change, why change is not about loss, but is about hope and possibility? Who, for example, are we missing from making sure that south to south, south to north, east to west discourses start to create a universal language of change?
It's an interesting question, and I think when you think about who's missing, what I often think about is where someone's coming in this conversation, right? They can't really act if they don't know in full what the issue is. And so I find information awareness videos very helpful. Things that, it's holiday season for most folks in December, right? What are 5 sustainable fashion gifts that you can give to a loved one? And giving folks that option, they might not even know that those exist because they're used to going to big box retailers and everything that is at the forefront. Show of hands, for instance, how many people have seen an Exxon ad since you've been here at COP? I have, all across social media. Why? Because they know where to go to get the messages across. And those messages are like 4 or 5 seconds, right? They're not long ads at all. But what that does is it taps into a network of folks who might not be privy to that message, but they are listening in some form of fashion. Where they lie on the issue is subjective, but the message is getting out there, and that is how you're reaching them, because you're going to where they reside and going at them at a lens that they can understand. I think about American football too in that the popularity of American football, what made it cool, did not happen overnight, right? That took decades of marketing and storytelling and charity and all the other things that they put at the forefront to hide a lot of the angst, if you will, that also comes with American football. But that isn't what you see in the community, and it's not also what you see on TV. It is the glitz and glamour of what they put forth because of the power of storytelling. And that is how I think we reach people who may not be represented here in the room, at COP, in Dubai, and across the world.
Which requires us to come to this with a degree of systematic organization, strategy, tactics, a sustained play. But there, when you are thinking about how you're building a brand, you're thinking about that, right? This is long-term, short, medium, long-term arcs of buy-in. How do you get to outliers, the people who wouldn't normally look at you or look at the brand?
They will not look.
Yeah, people who wouldn't normally come anywhere near what Benedetti is offering. How do you get to them?
Oh, how I get to people. I think visual material is the most important, because with visuals you catch curiosity from the people, and then because women want to look beautiful, and the big issue in sustainable fashion was long years how to make it beautiful, because it was very difficult. How I'd explain, you didn't have colors, still now you don't have lots of patterns. The materials are not so, let's say, fantastic how with normal textiles. but they are very environmental friendly. So I start working really, if you think 5 years or 10 years ago, sustainable fashion was about natural colors, okay? I want to change, and I did it full colorful and full of patterns, because I want that, I knew that at one point all brands will have to become sustainable if we want to sustain the planet and to survive. So that's why I work a lot on design. And another thing, most of people still now, how I said, sustainability, it's a heavy word. I think that now it's that even they don't want to listen anymore, because it's it's too much marketing, and at the other side, it's about greenwashing. So they lost trust, and this is has not to come to this, because when you lost trust, you don't want to do change anymore. And this is what we have to repair. But this we can repair just with rules, with transparency, with communication, and to become, the most difficult thing, I think, is to be honest. And this we have to support.
Which is, so this is where we get to this interesting question of, if one of the things we know we're facing is increasing tension and fear and uncertainty and kind of breakdown, conflict, war, then it's much harder and harder and harder to maintain that trust, or find people that you trust, or work out which of the stories is the one I should believe. The one that tells me that this is going to get worse and worse, so stop trying to believe climate, or the one that says race ahead and embrace a world in which you give up all sorts of things you thought were aspirational living. Let's think about, let's just reflect a little bit together as a whole panel. I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on this. What helps, what enables storytellers, wielders of story in music, story in dance, story in digital imagination, virtual worlds, story through the power of individual examples, story woven together in film, television, major campaigns to connect people to financial instruments they wouldn't combine. Every one of you has brought a different element. How would each of you in your own practice face into the next 7 years of uncertainty and fear and growing tension or polycrisis? What would you double down on to make your acts of storytelling hold and enlarge the space for action?
Humor. That's it, just humor. When we sign a partner, a blockchain partner, as one of our rosters in sponsorship, the community, the gaming community, is very against blockchain, because they talk a lot about the environmental damage that blockchain could have. The blockchain that we found and we partnered with was a fantastic blockchain, is a fantastic blockchain. Anyways, so we did the first launch video, and it was dreadful. It was worst PR crisis that we've ever had. Everyone in the company was super nervous. The partner was about to pull out of the deal. It was a big, big deal. So they came to me and they're like, Laura, what do we do? And I love to laugh. So I told them, how about we do 10 facts about what blockchain is not? So we went and we did, we filmed on phones, we did 4 phones, and we filmed on phones, and we just walked around the city of Stockholm and filmed, debunking myths of blockchain. We asked people about, oh, so what do you think is blockchain? And then they'll be like, I don't know, they'll come up with some normal, weird answer, and then we'll be like, aha, it's not. And then we came up with the in a funny way, in short format video, the debunking of all of those myths. Doing that actually changed the whole perspective. Right now, this is our 3rd year in our partnership with Silica, and in the range of all of our partners, they are ranked number 2 in brand association and how they like the brand association that we have with them. So little, more, whatever it is, just laugh. who doesn't like to laugh?
Yeah, create that kind of relief of the stress that's bearing on
Exactly.
people.
I mean, I think the person that you mentioned it a little bit on like the pub part, the ALS bucket challenge. It's that. It's just funny. It makes you laugh. You have 100 different wars, things happening around you. You sit down, you scroll on your phone, and then you giggle and you laugh a little bit. That's what I think that will relieve a lot of it, even though they're topics that should not make you laugh, but you can always have that funny angle to it.
Thank you, Laura. Sveta?
I fully agree with that. Has anyone heard of Yellow Dot Productions? It just launched, Adam McKay's production group, which is doing satire on the climate crisis, because you have to find humor in this. And the movie Don't Look Up, he was the director behind that. And so that was a comedy, right? I mean, it was terrifying, but it was a satire and it reached audiences, and more of that is coming. So I'm really glad that you said that, because it's true, and it's very much what humans need to come together to find hope. Because I actually don't mind that all this bad news is coming out. The science behind behavioral action is that you need to scare people. We're in a saturated landscape, and it's terrifying, but it reaches people when it's terrifying. But it can't stop there, because if you just give people bad news, they will be immobilized. So it needs to be this really unique combination of scaring people, sure, because the truth is actually terrifying. We're not going out of our way to scare people. So you do have to break through the saturated landscape, tell the truth, the climate realities, the climate crisis, all of that, but then lead very quickly with action steps to take and invigorate hope in people. Show the stories of individuals doing things, get them excited that one person can make a difference. Add a second person, it's a team. Add a third person, it's a group. Join online a campaign, and now you're part of a global movement. Add your voice to your signature to a petition, your voice to a massive effort. Turn that from virtual to real world. And so if you scare and then lead with, these are the steps to take, here's your contribution, what you can do, that combination is powerful, and that's what we need to do, because we don't have time. These next 7 years are super urgent, like you said. So for me, it's very much about fear to action.
Thank you, Sveta.
And hope. Hope,
And
inspiration,
hope.
action. Yes, you need
Yeah,
that.
you
Don't
need-
just scare people. Make sure that they have hope.
Melissa?
Sure. So I just love that you all brought up those emotions. I would say amplification is a big thing for me. I recently published a piece in Rolling Stone on women working in climate action across various sectors. Shameless plug. I just published it, I think, 4 days ago. And it is about these kick-ass phenomenal women working in climate action in everything from biodiversity to carbon markets to venture capital to science to tech. There's one organization that is working with rocket ship engineers to turn biomass into carbon negative fuel. I mean, this is the kind of stuff science fiction novels could be written about. So there's no shortage of incredible people, not just women, incredible people all around the world doing miraculously innovative things. And those stories need more attention, they need more spotlight. And I think that in addition to telling these stories, very, very important, but also highlighting local community leaders, you know, the people that are creating local gardens, the people that are working with farmers to understand regeneration more, the people that are working to get utility bills down in local communities in the South, in the United States. You know, there's no shortage of these stories, and we just need more amplification. We need more solidarity. We need sharing more of these stories. And if there's humor and joy, a little fear, motivating factors all involved, then you've got yourself a solid story.
Thank you. Mattea?
Well, I'm working on beauty, no? For me, beautiful things, beautiful design, it's attraction. When it's attraction, you dress, you feel better, but at the same time, you can feel proud, because at the same time, for beauty, you do something good. And how I see things is that we can live at the same level, but just with clean technology and different ways of making things. We can have everything. We have knowledge, we have the innovations, we have material, everything we have, but we have just to switch the way we are making things. And how I see in practice, we can absolutely come to the same level, even better, and we can be, in mind, we can be free, because we can preserve the nature.
Thank you.
For me, it goes back to just reimagining that world where we thrive and giving folks examples of what that looks like. And so something as simple as, telling a family member next time you rent a car, rent an EV and just see how it feels to drive it, and giving them that taste of what a clean energy future looks like for everyone. You talked about humor in gaming, and on the humor piece, Hip Hop Caucus released a comedy special, really, about 4 comedians in the Hampton Roads area in Virginia in the U.S. And it was just 4 comedians standing on stage, one by one, saying, rising sea levels, we can't get with that because the flood comes. I don't want to get my hair wet. I don't want to be ashy. I can't swim. Right? Being able to give folks information in a way that relates to them, but also tell them what they can do about it later, to Sheta's point, like, that is how you reach an audience that is not here, right? Going into gaming, what does world building look like? Can we go into a virtual reality space and show folks virtually, right, through gaming or through some live on Twitch, that this is what our future looks like if we do these 5 things, 10 things, or whatever it is from their perspective, from an individual perspective. And that could be, action that they don't take themselves, but they ask someone or they urge a representative to take, right, on their behalf. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach, but I think it all goes back to reimagining that world where we thrive.
And designing for humans, designing for our fears, our hopes, our losses, but also our capacity for empathy. I am holding a question of where do we speak from when we already have some degree of safety? If you have no safety, then how do we put this together? Let me create a space for thoughts or reflections or questions for the audience before we wrap. Can I ask you to... Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Laura.
Hi, I'm Harley Pope. I'm from the University of Reading. I'm hearing a lot of sort of communication strategies that are aimed at individuals, the way that we tend to consume media at the moment, maybe individually on our phones. And that kind of seems in contrast to the sort of more community storytelling that I've seen elsewhere at COP, particularly with sort of indigenous communities and some of the social social cultural sort of groups coming together to protest as well. I'm hearing a lot about sort of the need for positive message so that we can't scare people. But I'm also aware that when we look at a lot of advertising strategies, big firms are directing individuals to change their behavior. And quite often we use, sort of responsible consumption as a sort of a marketing tool. So how do we actually deal with some of the systemic issues and move past this idea of you can have your cake and eat it? We don't really need to change. We just need to, increase the efficiency of our consumption, and we can still do what we want and have the fun, lives that we want, when actually that's perhaps not the case. So where do we actually get the hard messages in and not just kind of smooth over the real challenges that we have to make to our lives?
It's a very, very pertinent question. Who wants to pick that up? Because I am very much wanting to acknowledge this. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. I think there's a lot that we can do about how to reimagine living differently that is actually a world of abundance, but it's not substituting what we're doing now.
I'll just do a quick response to that. This is not a question that will garner a quick response, but I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and it is infrastructural issue broadly. We need to make it easier for people to make the right decisions, and that requires multilateral efforts, governments, everything that's coming out of this. And the average person to this day is like, what can I do? I'm one person. But what I need to see happen with individuals is a societal awakening of how to engage with the planet. The reason we're asking people to acknowledge their carbon footprint and to think about their consumption habits is because we have mistreated the planet so badly, and that has to change as we build this more equitable future where human beings recognize that there's the golden rule, do unto others as you want to do unto yourself. That's how we need to teach children from the get-go that we are stewards of this planet, and we need to treat the planet as though the way we would want the planet to treat us in return. That's ultimately why I ask individuals to change their behaviors, for that societal reckoning, awakening, and then ultimately it comes down to the private sector and public multilateral negotiations to make the real changes that's needed. But going forward, as we build this new world, human beings need to be better stewards of the planet. It has to be a core value intrinsically, universally.
So what we're saying, in other words, is humor, beauty, joy, connection, community, the things that mobilize us to act, but it has to come to identity. Because if we retain our notion of identity as having dominion over with the right to exploit, as opposed to being deeply dependent upon with the obligation to steward, then we do not find ways to integrate. I'm going to bring this panel to a close. Thank you for a fantastic reminder that there's also a question around how do we have hard conversations about a balancing act that does not have sufficient resources for all of us to live the way we are. I'm a historian of medieval and Renaissance European cities. One of the remarkable things that I have learned to watch is for 500 years in Europe, you had cities creating one powerful story for becoming, even though governments changed every 6 months. And it was the story of what to become and why that mattered and why it was so much better for everybody that sustained that. Perhaps amongst us, we can find a way to bring story into this COP process that is about fear and is about hope and the extraordinary power of hope to make ourselves different. Thank you very much for your contributions.